Hey friends, episode 4 of Stand Up Pete Dominic. We made it. Can you believe it? Welcome to all the big Joe Rogan fans who are giving me nothing but love after my appearance on Joe Rogan. It's episode 4. Thank you so much for subscribing, for the ratings. I think it's going pretty good. We'll see what happens. Can't wait. And the Patreon subscription is now up too. You can subscribe on Patreon to support this show, and we definitely are going to need it. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Subscribe, rate, and learn with me. Grow with me. I thought today's episode should be about taxes, given the news this week, the big controversy with Bill Gates saying he doesn't want to pay more taxes, and he's, not a big fan of Elizabeth Warren, apparently. Then we got Mike Bloomberg joining the race potentially. He's a billionaire. Like, there's somebody out there saying, I really, really want to be president, is another billionaire, two now in the running, Bloomberg and Tom Steyer. I thought, let's sit down with Maura Quint again. She's my sometimes co-host here on Stand Up, but really in real life, we didn't get to talk with her in the first episode. I didn't ask her much about her organization or activism, Tax March, but we had a really wide-ranging, I think thoughtful, thought-provoking conversation about morals and ethics of taxes and how it all works and why it's rigged. Here's a thoughtful conversation with Maura Quint about taxes here on episode 4 of the Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast. First week of November is in the past. It's in the can. It's over. It's done. And my friend, guest, and sometimes co-host on this new podcast is Maura Quint. She's joining me now for this first segment or block, whatever you call it on a podcast. It's the first conversation and of this podcast episode. She's the executive director of a really awesome organization called Tax March, taxmarch.org. She's also a contributor for The Onion. She's written for The New Yorker. She's really smart, really funny. She tweets very well and has been very active this week at Behind Your Back. If you're not following her, if you're on Twitter and you're not following her, you're really missing out on awesome stuff. And Maura, thank you for joining me. As always, appreciate having you here, especially on this week, because
thank you.
Yeah, you texted me and we were talking about what we're going to talk about, and you just texted me like, it's been a scary week for billionaires.
Yeah, they're coming out of the woodwork. I didn't realize we had so many billionaires, but they just keep popping up.
Do you know any billionaires? Have you ever met any billionaires?
Well, I used to work in fundraising, so I met a lot.
Oh, right. Of course you did. Do you want to make any generalizations, or is it like not even a fair thing to do about a person based on their wealth?
The big generalization I would make is that they are not as smart as we think they are. Like, we give them this sort of superpower. Oh, they must be brilliant geniuses, right? They made all this money. They must have some amazing ability none of the rest of us have. Not at all. They're as dumb as any of us. That's the thing that I would take away.
I love
Everything
that.
else is, fungible. It can come and go.
No, that's I felt bad about asking you to generalize about them, but that's a perfect thought. Yeah, we measure people's intellects often by their financial wealth.
We do. We absolutely do. I think we do it in like a really inherent way. We don't even notice
Sure.
we're doing it, but we just sort of internally elevate them. Like, they must have something that we don't have if they have stuff that we don't have, like lots of money. So they must have something internal, some sort of quality, some brilliance or genius. And that's just, no.
It's so well said, but I mean, forget billionaires. I feel that way sometimes. I do that exact thing a lot. I try not to anymore. I mean, often I don't, especially if I'm in like a corporate office. I literally think in my head, I look at the corner offices, I'm like, they're not better than me by any measure. Which is a weird thing, but it's good because that way you don't fall into these ideas of hierarchy and that person's better than me. But all I was going to say is we do that even with people who have anything more than us. I mean, you just said that, but it doesn't have to be just billionaires. They have a bigger house, they've got a boat, they got better cars. They must be better. They must be smarter. They must have, most importantly, worked harder than me. Right.
Oh, absolutely. It was really, really eye-opening. Like, I know the exact moment that all of that sort of that belief ended for me. One of my first jobs that I ever had out of school, like, I grew up in kind of a smallish town. Like, I didn't really know extremely rich people. The rich people I knew were the ones who, like, ooh, they went on vacation once a year. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't the crazy thing where they had a jet. Like, it was just,
Right.
Okay. They took a plane on a vacation. That was mad. That meant you were rich. But like, by my first job, I worked in an office with very wealthy people. And I just thought, oh my gosh, these people are really important. And
Right.
I was just an assistant. I was nobody. But I would have these phone calls with these CEOs, and the amount of stuff they didn't know that I, as like a 22-year-old, already knew, the amount of stuff that they just had no seeming concept of, and the amount of they weren't able to like follow just some basic logic and things. I mean, it didn't mean that they couldn't do anything or they had no, but this idea that they were somehow just inherently better was just immediately sort of popped. Like, oh no, that's not what happened at all here. Maybe they did something really fantastic. They really put a lot of work into something and they did something, or maybe they didn't. Maybe their dad did and he knew a guy. And,
right.
and like, it really was just, it was meaningless.
I love that. I mean, I wonder if people listening have had similar experiences, if they share our view, which is basically about that your wealth does not determine your work ethic or your intellect. And if they've had similar epiphanies like you just had, I was trying to think while you were talking, even though I swear more, I listened to every word. If I've had a similar kind of epiphany, if there was a moment, but I think I've probably had lots of moments like that. But I would just also, I mean, the reverse is true, right? As well, Maura, which is that if we look at people's wealth and what they have, whether they're billionaires, millionaires, think they worked harder or they are better, smarter by any level. We do the same thing for people living in poverty. They don't work hard, they're lazy, they take handouts, and they're dumb.
Right. Absolutely.
We do the reverse as well.
Absolutely. Do that all the time. And
Look down.
It's interesting too, because so many of us, many more of us know people who are struggling than know people who are super rich. There are more people struggling, so there are more of us who know people who are struggling, or are ourselves. And yet even it's so internalized that like even having that immediately in your life, whether it's yourself or your family or your friends, and you see these people and you know, wow, no, they're really hardworking, they're very smart, they're like, you can look at them individually and ascribe all of these qualities to them and still walk away with this sort of internal belief that like, yeah, but the majority of people aren't. The rest of them are not trying so hard, or are not. Like, you can still do that even when it affects you personally, because it's so hardwired in our culture to believe that.
Hardwired in our culture and hardwired in our minds and our upbringings. You know, like you just said, like it's also a really interesting observation and admission about your life that you thought people who were wealthy were people who got to go on vacations and got to go on planes. It's everybody has a different definition or example of what their perspective is on wealth. That's yours. Mine, I think to some extent, was like they had the better video game system. Like that meant they made more money because they had ColecoVision. But I know a lot of people looked at my family that way because we skied. We had passes to Song Mountain in upstate New York. To be fair, and it's always what's true is that you pull back the curtain on something. My dad was a ski instructor, so our whole family could get free passes. Like we weren't paying for them, but people didn't know that.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I definitely, growing up where I grew up, I was the like upper middle class. That was definitely and that's how I thought of myself too, in terms of like my friends. I mean, I had friends who lived in trailer parks and we didn't live in a trailer park. And we, my parents would buy like a brand name cereal, like things like that. Like, and we had, I had my own bedroom. Like these were things where I was like, yeah, no, I'm the wealthier person here. And I had that really internalized as like, I didn't know the word privilege, but I knew it at the time to know that like, wow, I'm lucky that I have something here that other people around me don't have. And then when I went to school, I went to a state school, an in-state school, public university. And I was like, oh no, I'm again, really, really lucky because I'm not taking out any loans. My parents are helping me pay tuition. I had to work to pay for like my housing and my food and my books and all those sort of things, but I didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs like other people I knew.
Right.
So I felt super, super so through all of that, I felt really, really wealthy and really privileged. And then I lived in Los Angeles for like 5 seconds. I was like, oh no, wow, no, this is not what other people think of as wealth. Nope. I was totally out of line here with the rest of society in terms of what rich is. You're not rich when you go to an in-state university.
Yeah, but I mean, it's everything you just said is so interesting. I'm sure everybody listening has similar experience or perspective on what they think is wealth and growing up, what you thought it was. I'd love for people to tweet us and share with examples
Definitely.
about what their perspective. Oh, I thought the rich kid was the one who did this or that, as Maura and I have been saying. And so this is a weird, you want to do some therapy for me right now, because this is
I'm charging you though.
Shit, it's going to be extra.
Oh yeah, no.
I can't afford it. Forget it. I mean, that's how I'm glad you said that, because my concern right now for my family is health insurance. So I lost my job at SiriusXM. So, they gave me a severance, so I have time to figure it out. But we found out health insurance is $2,500 for the four of us. And so I've been doing this sick thing where I look around at people, usually men, but anybody, and go, oh, I bet you that guy has a good health insurance policy. And that is how currently I'm defining wealth in my mind. Like, you have to have a certain amount of money, people say, and you have to have access to health insurance, which is what I argued with Joe Rogan about why people are happier in other countries. They're not worried about getting shot, and they have health insurance. They're not worried about getting sick and going bankrupt, and that makes you happy. It makes you less stressed. So the therapy question is, how do I stop looking at other people and wondering whether or not they have health insurance or what their financial situation is? Because it's poison for your brain.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, just in general, any sort of comparing yourself to others is envy is bad. There's a reason we hold it up as sort of an evil and a sin, right? It is corrosive. It actually does really, really hurt you. So I think, you have to just sort of look and see what you have access to and what you have, and focus on that, and recognize that there are others who would be desperate to be you.
Exactly. Perspective, because it's always a great reminder to see others, what their kids are going through. My other last thought experiment on this is, even if you do have unlimited wealth, even if you are a billionaire, if your child is terminally ill and your money can't cure your kid's sickness, can't end their pain, and they die, you'd rather have zero money and a healthy child. Meaning, that's how I look at wealth. Wealth should be defined by, in my mind, I shouldn't be shitting people, but by the time. The equation is time you have with the people you love, and to some extent what their health is like, because there's so much pain when health deteriorates, as we all understand. And so the billionaire with the sick kid they can't cure is poor. What do you think of that thought experiment?
Well, I mean, there's studies that have actually shown, in terms of how much does money increase a person's happiness, and it only increases their happiness to the point where all of their basic needs are met. So, if you have no money and you don't know how you're going to pay for a place to live and food and things, then getting more money is going to make you happier. But the moment that you have a roof over your head, you have your food covered, you have general health taken care of, all those sort of things, money stops making you, it doesn't go up. Your happiness doesn't go up with additional money. So I mean, that's really it. Like, as long as you are healthy and happy, and the people you love are taken care of in that way, then that's it. That's the best you can possibly do. And you can have billions of dollars, but if you don't have those things, then you're less. You don't have as much access to joy. I'm
so glad you explained it and explained that there's a real data set. There's a lot of research that explains what you just said. And I try to remember that all the time, and everybody should, because, regardless of where you're at, there's so many people who are doing so financially well, but so mentally unwell, because they say to themselves, well, I'm only going to be happy when I get a Tesla. I'm only going to be happy when I get that ring. Whatever you think makes you happy, whatever material thing makes you happy, it's almost like, look around, you've got a vacation home. Are you serious? You're not happy? Like, it's not about your material wealth. It's about any number of other things. Stop it.
Right. It's about envy then. That's where envy really is totally just driving the entire train there, because it's just, but Bill Gates has a bigger Tesla. I don't know. They make different size Teslas, but whatever. You're looking at other people and saying, well, they have more. And that's just
clearly that's not I use that as my example, because that's literally the thing that I want. I have a Chevy Volt. with 100 and whatever 50,000 miles on it. It's breaking down, and like so I have to think about another car. Right now, I just want a car that we have two cars that one of it, both are kind of like old. I'm like, so that's just to look back at our conversation to say, well, no, what I really want right now is going to have to be a new car. Do you want to admit that there's anything that you want that you can or can't afford and you're just not getting it?
I literally signed up for health insurance like last week. So, I mean, I'm really happy right now because I didn't have that for a period of time.
No way,
yes.
Maura.
Oh my God, I can go to a doctor. This sounds amazing. There were like all these, things that I was supposed to test and whatever. And
I'm so sorry to hear that. How long did you go without it? That's so scary.
Yeah, it was. I didn't go very long. And it was just a product of like, my job wasn't offering it. And then I had it through marriage and got divorced. So like there was just this gap of period of time. And,
but that gap is not right. It's not right that we have to ever be thinking about that you're walking across, a tightrope on a bridge or some smarter metaphor that you could probably come up with. And you're going to fall off at any second. I mean, who can live that way?
It physically the whole time. Like it's just especially, I mean, luckily my kids were covered, so I was very fortunate in that. So they were taken care of, but there was certainly a feeling of, since I have kids, like, wow, it's not just me, so I can't fall down these stairs.
No, exactly. No, for me, it would be like, whatever, like snowboarding, skiing. Like I better not forget it. Exactly. But you just said I shouldn't go down these stairs. I certainly can't. Maybe I shouldn't even be going for a run. I shouldn't exercise because it's, I could risk injury. And
let's pretend that was my problem.
That's good.
I didn't exercise because of that. That was the reason. Whatever you just said was definitely the reason I have not exercised.
All right. So you are the executive director of Tax March. And this week, there's a lot of conversation about taxes. So you're really the perfect person to talk to on today's episode of the podcast. And this week, we heard a lot from two billionaires that most people probably are familiar with. Michael Bloomberg, who apparently thinks that there's a necessity for somebody else to run. There's a lane for another billionaire. There's already one billionaire, Tom Steyer, running. So we heard about Bloomberg, which I want to ask you about. But more importantly, what made a lot of noise this week was Bill Gates, who he was speaking with the New York Times Dealbook Conference. And he said that he's paid over $10 billion in taxes. He said, I've paid more than anyone in taxes. If I had to pay $20 billion, that's fine. But when you say I should pay $100 billion, okay, then I'm starting to do a little math about what I have left over. And then he said, I'm just kidding. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I should have the audio for it, but I don't even know if I'm allowed to play that at this point. I don't know the legal shit about podcasts. But anyway, that's the quote. And then he was critical of Elizabeth Warren, and she has now responded and said she'd be happy to meet with him. So anyway, for your reactions to Bill Gates, the comments there at the New York Times Dealbook Conference.
Well, my reaction was just pure outrage. It didn't help that I was sitting alone at a bar when I was first hearing this.
It helps me because I hope you're tweeting about it. I got to go back and look.
I couldn't shut up.
Awesome.
No, I was a little, I don't know, perturbed. Yeah, no, it was infuriating to me.
Why?
Absolutely infuriating. Why? Wow. Well, so many reasons. I think first of all, we generally have no real concept of what $1 billion is. It's just like a made up word. And we just hear it like, oh, it's like a thing that people can have, right? Like, oh, okay, he's got a Cuisinart and he's got $1 billion. It's just like, oh, okay, whatever those are. Yeah, sure. We have no concept. $1 billion is a ridiculous amount of money.
Great point.
$1 billion is a ridiculous amount of
money. $1 million. I guess maybe 1 million is not ridiculous at this point because a house cost $500,000 or whatever. But go ahead. Right. Sorry.
No, well, that's just it. Exactly. There's like a place you can ground it in, right? Like you've seen a house that costs $1 million.
Right,
even if you're not ever going to buy that house, you know that house exists. You know what that house is. You have a material idea of what $1 million is. It's a lot, but it at least exists in the world of the real. When you get to $1 billion, it's pure imaginary. Like we don't have any. That doesn't mean anything to us. Like there's not $1 billion house. There's not a thing that we can attach that to say, yes, that's how much it is. So because of that, I think we internalize it like it's a thing. Like it's like, oh, well, you could have $1 million, you could have $1 billion. Like, oh, that's just rich. As opposed to it's insane, crazy, over the top, like just beyond concept rich. It's like, it's not now just, oh, I have a lot of money and I can like do more fun things. It's like, I have more money than I can possibly ever spend.
Here's one of your tweets. I don't know if this one came from the bar, but it's you're quoting the Bill Gates comments on that I just said in your tweet, but you're right. These guys are addicted to winning the rich race, which is funny. I'm imagining that. They don't care how much money they have. They have more than can be used in lifetimes, plural. They only want to know they have more than the next guy. Tax them to hell and they'll still be the richest. Beyond that, they won't even notice. So expand on the tweet, which I paraphrase a tiny bit, everybody, but read her tweets at Behind Your Back. Maura, so what is Tax March? What is the effort there? And then, tell me about why taxing the Bill Gateses and Bloombergs at much higher rates should matter.
So Tax March is an organization. It started just as an organization from grassroots level to get Donald Trump to release his tax returns. And the point of that was so that we could have some oversight in government, so that we knew who he was working for, basically. Was he working in the interests of the people or himself and his friends? Of course, he didn't release his tax returns. That's still happening. And one of the only things really that the GOP did when they controlled both the House, the Senate, and the presidency, their big thing to help everyone was give these giant tax cuts to the wealthy. That was the one thing they had to push through when they could. So we have been... that
was 2017, I think?
That was 2017, yeah, right at the end. We have been basically on a campaign since before that to fight against those tax cuts and to educate about what the tax cuts did. And also then, in a more broad sense, to advocate for economic justice through the tax code, because really the tax code is something that can actually be used for good in all sorts of ways, but we don't think about it because it's really, again, it's sort of this like idea, and I once heard, have a lot of time to dig into it.
Yeah, well, I once heard somebody say that what you're referring to is the tax code, but I would also talk about the budget, meaning the way that you take in money and how you take in money and who from, but also how you spend money. And I once heard this phrase that it's a budget is your moral code. So That's what you're talking about. You're talking about who should get taxed on what type of work as a kind of morality, a sense of ethical economics, where if you make more, you pay more. And this idea that a lot of people, this is an argument I've always made to people, regardless of their political background, ideology, is, do you think you should be taxed on your work? Like how much work you do, how many hours, or how much kind of effort you put in, or should you be taxed on your money? So there's income taxes, which you pay on your salary and your wages, and there's capital gains, which is the tax you pay when you make money on an investment. And the vast majority of people will say, no, you should be taxed lower on your work, your salary, your wages, and you should be taxed higher on the money that you make when you buy or sell a stock or even real estate. What do you think of that kind of argument, and how can we make the argument that regardless of your political background, conservative, liberal, whatever, most people would agree on the ethical way to tax people?
We're nonpartisan, Tax March, and
taxmarch.org.
Yeah, we speak with people from across the political spectrum, and we do a lot of polling as well. And one of the things that we found is that taxing the rich, taxing the wealthy at proportional rates is something that is very popular across all political ideologies. It really doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent. You probably think that, the rich should be paying their fair share in taxes. They shouldn't be getting away with avoiding it, which they often are. And what you're talking about there in terms of how people are taxed, right now, we tax wages far higher than we tax capital gains, or we tax wealth, basically.
So a truck driver or a welder or a teacher gets taxed higher than a hedge fund manager or people who work in the financial industry making money off investments, or even other capital
gains. Or people
gains.
who don't work in the financial industry, people who just simply have investments.
Great point. Thank you. Yes, I'm demonizing them. Yeah, you had a stock portfolio, and good point.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that, Bill Gates, no, I'm sorry, not Bill Gates, Bezos. I get the B's and all the other.
The billionaire, whose names start with B, Bezos. And, yeah.
I think, what does he get? Like $70,000 from Amazon or something? Like he gets a very low salary.
So he pays taxes based on his very low salary?
Uh-huh. Yep. Because he just gets this little salary. So, it's not a big deal. And then he gets paid just like anybody else who's making $70,000 a year gets taxed. But then when he's making the majority of his money in capital gains, those are getting taxed at a way, way lower rate than the salary is. So it makes a lot more sense that he would prefer, if he wants to avoid paying taxes, prefer to get paid in, stocks and options and all those other sort of things, because you're going to pay a lot less in taxes than if he had $1 million salary. So that, right now we have this like very, very backward system where people who have the opportunity to make a lot of wealth and primarily make their money through these sort of investments get taxed very little. And somebody who is just, teaching third grade gets taxed at a much higher rate, because that person is not making most of their money through stock investments. They're making it from a paycheck that they get every week or month for working.
We're touching on ethics and arguments and giving our own opinions on it, but I always like to plug thinkers and journalists and academics and books, and I'm sure you're familiar with David K. Johnston, Maura, but if folks aren't, when I read two of his books back to back, my entire understanding of our tax system, I didn't have any understanding of our tax system before I read them, but he explains in both his two books, Free Lunch and Perfectly Legal, about how our tax system works and who benefits and who doesn't, and he has so many examples, and it's a history of it, and they're really, really fascinating books. I highly recommend you get those two books, David K. Johnston, Perfectly Legal and Free Lunch, because it explains a lot of what Maura, I think you're talking about and touching on as well. The New York Times today has, it's on Friday, November 8th, I should say, an editorial about this week, which we're talking about Bill Gates and Mike Bloomberg announcing he's going to run. I want to get your take on that. But they have an editorial that says, the billionaires are getting nervous. Bill Gates and others warn that higher taxes would lead to lower growth. They have their facts backward. It's always the argument that higher taxes lead to less economic growth and that they're punitive morally and that it's going to mean people are going to move out of your state or your country to get around them. And there's a lot of data in this editorial, but I thought it was interesting that they make the point that all of these tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, every tax cut means that we're creating deficits because we're not cutting spending at the same rate. So they write, the federal government needs a lot more money. Decades of episodic tax cuts have left the government deeply in debt. The Treasury is on pace to borrow more than $1 trillion during the current fiscal year to meet its obligations. The government will need still more money for critical investments in infrastructure, education, and the social safety net. So one more question about taxes, which is, give me an example of how you think taxes should be spent more morally, more thoughtfully to create good outcomes for the majority of people. Is that how I wanted to word that question?
Yeah, that works. But there are so many different ways that we can spend the money coming in. I don't even want to begin to suggest a budget other than
universal pre-K.
Yeah, when we look at all these different sort of progressive issues that people are pushing, universal pre-K, free college, college debt forgiveness, universal health care, all of these things are clear benefits to society. They're things that are going to help the majority of people. And they're the only things that ever get questioned. Well, how are you going to afford that? How are you going to pay for that? And that's nonsense, because we give these trillions in tax cuts. No one ever says how you're going to pay for that. There's never that question. The question only comes up when we're doing something that's actually going to be helpful and good, and not just going to allow a billionaire to buy their 15th yacht. Then we don't care. Then whatever, it doesn't matter. So I think that we need to be much more thoughtful about when we're asking how things are going to get paid for, and make sure that it's something that is being asked when it's something that is not going to be a proven good for society, like a giant tax cut. And the other stuff, we will figure out. We have a lot of different options for income and revenue that we can explore, but we have to have people in office who actually want to do that.
I just read another one of your tweets, and it's really outrageous and really offensive. You wrote,
Oh, no.
You wrote, Bill Gates' charitable foundation won't keep him from eternally licking wart-covered balls in hell.
Oh, yeah.
Will someone who knows Bill Gates please pass that on? You tweeted that.
Yeah, I did tweet that. I told you I was drinking.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean,
sometimes.
his charitable foundation, it's this, what you're saying there, though, the subcontext I'm going to read into it is a lot of very wealthy people bring their taxable income down by donating to charities, and then they feel good about themselves and can sleep at night. Is that what I'm hearing in that tweet?
That is what you're hearing, yes. And that is also the argument that then gets used of like, well, hey, there are good billionaires. Look at all the good that they're doing with their charities. See, they're doing something that is a good for humanity, which, okay, yeah, there is a good for humanity when you're talking about charities and foundations. Not all of them. I mean, Trump has a foundation too, but a lot of them do good things in the world. But that doesn't offset the amount of harm that they do by not paying into society. And that sort of like whim of a billionaire deciding he wants to give some money this week to this particular cause is not something that you can actually sustain a society that works for everyone on. You have to actually start with, all right, how do we make society work for everyone? And let's distribute it in ways that can actually help people in a real way. And that's taxes. That's taxes right there. And then on top of that, trust me, he'll still have billions left over.
Right.
And so if he wants to take some of that and, build a new, art center, he can do that.
I mean, I don't know where you're at. You don't have to respond to this, but I don't think any one person should have, I'm for some kind of maximum wage. I don't think any one person should have so much financial wealth, and that might sound radical to a lot of people. And I don't think it's radical at all. We have 7 billion people on the planet. You can't have such disproportionate amounts of wealth, and you can't make an argument that they deserve it or that they earned it. It's not as long as people are wiping their asses with their hands and starving to death. You tweeted also, helping others in need is kindness. Rich people philanthropy is a scam to avoid taxes and feel better about the evils they consistently inflict upon the world. Yes, rich people philanthropy is a scam to avoid taxes. And helping others in need should have nothing to do with how much you can help them with your money. It's about any number of daily things you can do to help other people in your life or complete strangers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes me absolutely crazy when people point to that as a reason to justify billionaires' existence. Like they're doing some good. It makes me crazy because it's I'm not calling billionaires Nazis, but Hitler did like dogs. Like, you can look to goods that people do that doesn't necessarily.
Did you say ducks or dogs?
Dogs. I mean, I don't know. He might have liked ducks too. I don't really have any information on that. I'm not gonna say the guy didn't like ducks. Maybe he did.
Let me ask you before I let you. Hey, listen, I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not Hitler liked ducks. So before we wrap, I just do have to get your take on, speaking of billionaires, Mike Bloomberg is considering, where's the news, that he's considering entering the race. Yeah. Ex-New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg takes another look at presidential bid. He's expected to meet a Friday deadline for qualifying. Well, I guess people at this point will know. Oh, for the Democratic primary ballot in Alabama. Okay.
Right. I don't know. I don't understand primaries enough to know why you'd start with that. I don't know if it has to be alphabetical or what, but yeah, Alabama.
What is your reaction? There's already one billionaire in the race, Tom Steyer.
That's right.
Mike Bloomberg, what does he bring to the... I mean, there's this idea that we need I know a lot of progressive friends of mine are getting scared that there isn't the right candidate to win. They like Warren, they like Bernie, but they think they're going to be so demonized that they could possibly lose or whatever. And so we need someone who's more, I guess, moderate. Is that what I'm hearing from a lot of people?
Everyone is going to be demonized. I mean, at this point, like we've seen the right call, like Buttigieg a socialist. I mean, like they'll take any moderate candidate and call that person a complete socialist. So like we can't. What are they going to say? We already know what they're going to say.
Or in this case, they're going to call Mike Bloomberg. You know what they're going to call him? Jewish. Like that's going to be so. It's not going to be quiet. It's not going to be.
Say that. They're going to call him a globalist. Let's
that's overt though. That's still. But exactly. Yes. I mean, they're going to point to him being a Jewish financial person. I mean, Mike Bloomberg.
Sure, he's an elite.
There's that elite globalist. What else though? Do you look at him and say why? I'm assuming.
Oh, I mean, it's really. I mean, if you thought that he was entering because, like, oh gosh, he thinks someone should be more centrist, you have centrist candidates in the race right now. So if that was really his concern, Bloomberg would just be writing a massive check to Klobuchar or Buttigieg or even like Booker. There's people that he could get behind and just, pay their way onto the debate stages. But that's not what he's doing. It's just pure. It's one of two things. Either it's just pure ego and just like, well, as the rich person, I'm obviously the one who knows best and therefore need to be in charge. I mean, it's just like another sort of Trumpian kind of mentality. So it's possibly that, or he doesn't want to just go all in for Trump, but wants to run as a third-party spoiler, and so this is a way to start getting known, and then he can run as a third-party spoiler and not have to worry that there'll be a Democrat in office who will jack up his taxes. But he didn't technically support Trump, but somehow Trump's still in office in 2 years, and he doesn't have to pay more in taxes. So I don't know. One of the two, and neither of them are good.
My biggest criticism of Mike Bloomberg is that he is on record that's saying that the financial industry deregulation that they pushed for, it was not the main primary cause of the Great Recession of 2008. That the deregulation of the financial industry was not the primary cause, and of course, there's really not much of an argument on that, in my opinion. Read Barry Ritholtz, speaking of books, Bailout Nation. He writes all about that in that book as well, and there's so many other good ones. All right, Maura, I took up way too much of your time, but this is a perfect day to talk to you about taxes, and I can't wait to hear what people think about this conversation. She's on Twitter at BehindYourBackTaxMarch.org. Any other plugs, Maura?
Those are the big ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you very much to Maura for talking taxes with me. I would love to hear from you. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email. Subscribe on the Patreon, patreon.com/PeteDominic. Really appreciate it. Of course, tell all of your friends about the podcast, PeteDominic.com. Welcome to this show. We're going to keep growing and learning. It's a lot different doing a live show than it is doing a podcast. I'm learning. I appreciate all of your support. Probably been one of the, if not the craziest week of my life, doing Joe Rogan's show out in Los Angeles, coming down here to Atlanta to talk with guests that you'll hear coming up on the podcast, Rich Louv, Steve Nygren, and more. So thanks for your support. Gotta go right now. But episode 4 in the can. Episode 5 will be up on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to try to get these up. Then we'll go to daily. Then we'll go to live. Then who knows what is next. Just trying to be the change I want to see in the world. I really appreciate your support.